bringing the people behind our food to life.
When cooking with wild mushrooms, the first thing you need to understand is that they're coming from the earth. So you want to clean all that earth off of them, and that does require a fairly sophisticated piece of technical equipment. I call it a toothbrush. So all you really need to do is get those truffles under the water. Don't ever let them soak in the water because then they'll start to absorb too much of the moisture. But once you've rinsed most of the loose dirt off, you'll literally need to go through one at a time, lightly brushing off the excess dirt. Sometimes they get into those nooks and crannies and you need to get in there with the tough part of your toothbrush. Now make sure you do make a distinction between the brown dirt and the browning of the oxidizing truffle. You can usually tell because if it's gritty in your finger, it's dirt, but if it feels smooth, it's clean truffle. Go through them one at a time, and when you're done, lay them out onto a sheet of paper towels to let them dry. Today we're making our famous beef stroganoff dish, which is a dish that's been on the menu for over 10 years and it's never coming off. And the secret to it, at least during truffle season, is to make sure that we've got a good supply of truffle-infused beef. And I'm going to show you how to do that. First, what you'll need is a sealable container, some truffles, and a good quality cut of meat. You can choose to use a more flavorful cut like ribeye, but I prefer the tenderness of the beef tenderloin. Start by putting several layers of paper towels into the bottom of your container. This is going to help absorb the moisture that the truffles are going to continue to release even after they've come out of the ground. Put your freshly cut meat right on top, and then just toss your truffles all around it. You can do this with several cuts of meat at the same time, or you can do it with a hard-boiled egg. But the trick is to get those truffles not even in physical contact with your protein, in a sealed environment that absorbs the moisture into the refrigerator. Now the flavor can infuse in as little as 6 hours, but give it 3 days just to make sure. Now we're going to make the sauce for the beef stroganoff. We're going to take our raw onions right into the pot, give it a little heat, and then immediately add our chicken stock, our beef stock, our crushed garlic, dried porcini, and then our Chinese oyster sauce. And last but definitely not least, a little soy sauce. If you prefer to go gluten-free, tamari works great as well. Once everything's in there, you do want to make sure you give it a good stir because the viscosity of the oyster sauce is going to want to stick to the bottom of the pan, and you want to dissolve that into the other liquids. Once this comes to a boil, we're going to drop it to a simmer and let that reduce for about 5 to 10 minutes, making sure that the onions cook and do their thing with the flavor. Next, what I'm going to do is take our piece of filet mignon, our beef tenderloin that's been infusing for a few days, and cut it into equal size pieces by depth. Now here we're just going for a sear. We're not trying to cook it entirely on the pan, although that's absolutely an option. We're going to give it full color on both sides, cook it to about rare, and then we're just going to let it rest and finish cooking in the pan by itself. There we go. All right, now our meat's probably reached a nice rare inside. We're going to pull the meat off. And hit the pan with about a quarter cup of red wine. Just to get some of those cooking juices off of there. And then immediately pour it right into your sauce. Now that our sauce has been reducing for about 5 minutes, we're ready to add the heavy cream. Nobody ever said that this was a diet recipe. Take your heat all the way back up As we're waiting for the cream to come to a boil, we're going to give it our first salt check. Just about there. If anything, it's ever so slightly over-salted because of the amount of tamari I put in, but that's going to be compensated by both the cornstarch slurry as well as the sour cream that goes in. Our cornstarch slurry is equal parts cornstarch and water, and this is going to thicken the sauce up really quickly. So the idea is to make sure that you over-thicken it just a little bit, because when the sour cream gets warm, it's actually going to thin the sauce. When in doubt, you can always add a little bit of heavy cream and compensate with some salt. Now that the heavy cream's come to a boil, we can go ahead and add our cornstarch slurry. And be careful, it'll go from settled to overflowing really fast. Add a little bit at a time. It's always easier to thicken it up a little bit more if it's under thickened. There you go, look at that. Look at how rich and creamy that is. The heat is off. I'm going to add our sour cream. Now don't be shy, you can use as little or as much as you want. And I've turned off the heat because the residual heat in the pan is going to be enough to liquefy the sour cream for us. We're just going to whisk it gently enough to get the lumps out. Now for another taste test. See how it's coating the spoon? That's exactly how you want it. Perfect. Now we're going to slice the meat into bite-sized portions. And we're going to put it on our plate, where we've already added some lightly seasoned brown rice, garlic, onion, bell pepper, and thyme, but all very lightly seasoned. I'm going to ladle on some sauce. You can strain out your onions and garlic ahead of time, but I like them in there myself. And then last but not least, we're going to take the same truffles that we used to infuse the meat, using a truffle slicer, and slice it over the dish. Okay, a little more. And there you have your Oregon White Truffle infused beef tenderloin with Oregon White Truffles.
That's going to be Truffle Hunting, the movie. There will be mud. Now for the high-tech part. The truffle vesicle.